So NPM packages are constantly being updated, and if you use any of them in your projects, then probably the day after you've added one, or a week at least, you're probably using some out-of-date dependencies. Now, eventually you're going to want to update these, and so I'm going to show you in this video how I go about actually finding which ones need to be updated and make sure I update them correctly, that way not to break any of my code, and then I'm good to deploy it up and use it. So to start off, I am going to be walking through the Type GraphQL series project. So I'm just going to go through updating dependencies, what I would do for this particular project. So first off, what I like to do is just in the folder, I like to use this utility called NCU. You can install it by doing npm install, and it's called npm check updates. And so if I run this, all it's going to do is it's going to take a look at my package.json, and it's going to tell me which dependencies have a new version available. So we're going to be able to see what the current one is in our package.json. So for example, I currently have version 2.3.1 installed, but I could possibly upgrade this to 2.4.8. So what I do is I look for breaking changes. So there's basically two types of updates. Well, there's more like kind of like three types, but really there's only one kind of update that I care about when I'm doing this kind of check. And I want to know if some packages changed the way they work that are breaking, that would break functionality. So if I were to update them, I may crash my code. And the way you find it is most packages follow a system of versioning called semantic versioning. I'll link this below so you can read more about it, but basically it looks like this. So there's basically a number, another number, and a third number, all separated by dots. And the first one is the major, minor, patch. Major represents incompatible API changes, which means if you increase the number here, someone introduced a breaking change, most likely. Well, not most likely, they did. So if we look at TS node here, it went from 7 to 8. So we know they introduced a breaking change. We can see TS just made a breaking change as well, just 2. And then also we have to be mindful of like Type GraphQL, which is not even version 1 yet. They incremented and they had a breaking change here, 17, which we're going to look at. And then the second bullet is minor versions. So they only added, for example, new functionality, but it shouldn't break anything if you were to add this new dependency with this kind of version. And this just fixes a bug. So like, for example, if I were to increment to IO looks like they added some features and fixed some bugs. So adding that package or updating to the latest IO I have no fear that it will break anything. Now, of course, if someone does not follow semantic versioning, you have to be mindful of that. It could break your code. But in general, I look through my dependencies and see which ones are breaking and then go see what changes were made. So I identified, for example, Type GraphQL. It's not version 1, so I saw that has a change, and I also saw Jest has a change. So those are the two that we're going to start off to look at. So when I see a breaking change like that, what I'll do is I'll just go over to the GitHub page. I may be following these people on social media, Jest or Type GraphQL, and I see when releases come out that way, but more often than not, I'll just use that tool and then come over here. And then when I go out to GitHub, if you go to the releases tab, sometimes they'll put that there. In this case, Type GraphQL does. So I can see here's version 17, and they've listed the breaking changes that they introduced. So I can go ahead and change my code to match this. So basically, I just go through my code, and then I see if I'm using this. If not, I move on. Now, if we take a look at something like Jest, go to releases, you'll notice that they don't put any content here. The other place that they sometimes put content in is the changelog file. So if you look for a changelog.md, sometimes it's there. In this case, we can see the changes that they made if we scroll down to 24. So you notice they're at 24.3. We could scroll down all the changes they've made for each version. The one I care about is 24.0, and we could look for the breaking changes that happened with it. So 24.0.0. And we can see all the breakings. Also, something like Jest is very big, so they also release like blog posts. React is the same thing, so you can check that to see if something's going wrong there. And so after that, that's pretty much the procedure is go check things that are breaking, go read the release docs or the changelog, change anything in my code that has using the breaking, and then I'm pretty much trusting the other packages that they are they're using things, or they made changes that don't affect my stuff. Now, of course, after this, I'm going to just basically compile my code, and I'm using TypeScript. So TypeScript will check to see if anything from a TypeScript point of view changed that could be breaking, and then also, of course, write or run tests, and then just if all that passes, I'm happy. I go ahead and push. Now, this usually, it depends on how often you should do this. It really depends on how often you want dependencies. Personally, what I do is uh, if there's something that I know I want, a new feature that comes out, for example, like when React 16.8 came out and hooks were production ready, I just snap updated right away. Whereas if I didn't hear about anything that I really cared about, or I've been wanting something and I've been following them, then I'll pretty much just every month or so, I'll just come in, run this tool, see what's out of date, go through and see what changed, and go from there. Anyway, so that is the approach that I take to make sure that I'm not breaking any of my code when I come in and haven't updated some dependencies for a long time. I can't just go in and just increase all the versions on all of them. But also, I forgot to mention, so I've identified all these. Let's say I go and change all my code and it now matches. If we say NCU dash U, that'll increment. I think dash A does it for all. No, just JK. And this actually changes your package.json if you go in, and it'll actually make the change. I think you can also just run NPM update as well, and it'll actually update the package.json too. But yeah, and then after that, I just run yarn, and you have all the dependencies. So yeah, that just changed my package.json with the values.